At precisely 3 o'clock a.m., Ibrahim was pulled from sleep by the shrill ring of his secure satellite phone, a line that only 5 people in the world were authorized to use. Outside the presidential palace in Ouagadougou, the night was pitch black, the sky blanketed with silence. But what heard next would set into motion a series of events that could ignite a global firestorm and drag Africa into the center of a geopolitical war. "Mr. President," the voice said, calm but tight with urgency. "This is Foreign Minister Zarif. I'm calling from Tehran. Forgive the hour, but our cities are under attack. Israeli missiles rain down as we speak." Sat up, sweat soaking through his shirt as his military instincts kicked in. Outside his bulletproof window, security forces scrambled, clearly aware something extraordinary was happening. For weeks, headlines had been dominated by the Israeli-Iran conflict, but it all seemed so far away, until now. And what Iran was about to propose would change the balance of power on the entire African continent. Minister Zarif replied, steadying his voice. "How can Burkina Faso help Iran in this moment?" Zarif's response was chilling. "Mr. President, this is no longer a Middle Eastern war. Israel is expanding its reach, using African territory to run covert operations, surveillance posts, black site installations, drone staging. We have proof, and unless Africa stands united, it will be carved up for use." Breath caught. Just months earlier, his intelligence agency had intercepted communications linked to Israeli surveillance inside Burkina Faso. But the extent Zarif now described went far beyond anything he'd imagined. "Iran," Zarif continued, "is offering full-spectrum partnership to any African nation ready to resist. We will provide cutting-edge missile defense systems, investment in domestic industries, and energy technologies that break dependency on Western oil. You will be sovereign, secure, and strong." It was a stunning proposal. On the surface, Iran was offering to transform Burkina Faso from an isolated resource-dependent state into a formidable regional force. But new such offers never came without a cost. "What exactly are you asking in return?" he asked, eyes narrowing. Zarif didn't hesitate. "Diplomatic support on the world stage, deployment of Iranian technical personnel inside your borders, and, if necessary, access to your airspace for defensive operations." Defensive operations. The phrase sounded innocuous, but immediately understood its weight. It meant missile launches, possibly from Burkina Faso, targeting Israeli assets elsewhere in Africa. "You're asking me to make my country a battleground," said coldly. "No, Mr. President," Zarif countered. "We're showing you that Africa already is a battleground. Israeli operatives are active in over a dozen countries. They use African coastlines for intelligence, supply, and signal intercepts. You can continue to be exploited, or you can rise." Clenched the receiver. He knew the pattern well. African leaders who stood against Israeli or Western interests often met swift downfalls, assassinations, coups, sudden illnesses, unfortunate accidents. After the call ended, his hands trembled slightly as he summoned an emergency cabinet meeting. Within an hour, the secure war room of the palace was humming with tension and murmurs. It was 4 a.m., and every minister knew something seismic was unfolding. Defense Minister Cabaret opened the briefing. "Iran's intelligence confirms our worst fears," he began, gesturing toward high-resolution satellite images spread across the conference table. "Israeli-backed operations have been expanding. Covert shipments, surveillance hubs, paramilitary training camps all across neighboring states." The images spoke volumes. Foreign Minister Ouagadougou leaned forward, his voice grim. "Tehran's proposal isn't isolated. They're mobilizing across the continent, inviting other African nations into a regional alliance, a resistance network to counter Israeli presence." Everyone in the room understood. This wasn't just diplomacy. This was war by another name, and had a decision to make, one that could either elevate Burkina Faso to the center of a new African power bloc, or make it the next target in a shadow war no one was prepared for. Across the African continent, the intelligence that Ibrahim had just uncovered would append everything. Burkina Faso's intelligence chief Ouagadougou stepped forward with a grim expression. "Mr. President," he began, "Israeli operations extend across 12 African nations, and this isn't just spying. We're talking military advisors, weapons systems, covert logistics. They're integrating Africa into their Middle East war strategy." He tapped the screen. "Look here, Ethiopian units trained by Israeli specialists for cross-border missions. South African ports feeding naval intel back to Tel Aviv. Even mining operations in the DRC, guarded by Israeli contractors, reporting directly to Israeli Defense Command." Jaw clenched. Every line on the map felt like a threat. "Iran promises to neutralize this network," Foreign Minister Ouagadougou added, his tone sharp. "They offer defense systems that would block Israeli surveillance, economic deals to end our dependence on Israeli-linked firms, and intelligence cooperation that exposes every hostile operation across the continent." Sat back, rubbing his temples. The headache was building. "But that would make us combatants," he murmured. Then he looked up slowly. "According to this data, we already are. We've just been fighting without knowing it." What decided next shocked his entire cabinet. "Arrange a secure video link with Tehran," he ordered. Tell them the president of Burkina Faso wants to hear every detail of their proposal. His advisors froze. Engaging Iran during an open conflict with Israel would send shockwaves through global diplomacy. Mr. President warned National Security Advisor Israeli intelligence will know the moment we open that channel. Our alliance with them will collapse. Didn't he blink? Maybe it's time it did. Africa has spent decades letting others move the pieces on our board. It's time we make our own moves. But the real drama was only beginning. The next night's video conference erupted with bombshell revelations. Iranian officials unveiled intelligence proving extensive Israeli operations across Africa, sophisticated missile defenses valued in the billions, and offers of economic and energy independence. But what hit hardest was the evidence that Israel planned to expand these African outposts, using them as forward bases to strike Iran and its allies. Then, to everyone's surprise, made a bold pivot. This intelligence doesn't concern only Burkina Faso, he said firmly. It affects all of Africa. Any partnership must include the African Union and serve the continent as a whole. Within 72 hours, he had secured encrypted lines to presidents across the continent, quietly sharing Iran's findings. Shock spread like wildfire. Many African leaders had no idea their countries were hosting covert Israeli operations. If that astonished you, what followed next made history. A rare emergency session of the African Union was convened. Iranian representatives were invited to present their evidence and their proposal for Pan-African defense cooperation. The debate that followed was fierce. Some feared getting pulled into the Middle East quagmire. Others saw an opportunity to assert Africa's sovereignty. 6 months later, the transformation was undeniable. The African Union had enacted strict protocols to monitor foreign military activities on the continent. Several countries expelled Israeli advisors after uncovering unapproved operations, and for the first time, a coordinated African defense cooperation pact was formed. Iran joined as a strategic partner, providing missile defenses and surveillance tools, but operating under full African oversight. But progress came at a price. 3 separate assassination attempts targeted his government, weathered intense Israeli cyber operations. Western sanctions piled up. Still, his people stood by him. For the first time in living memory, Africans saw their leaders standing firm in global power struggles that had always ignored them. A year later, standing before the United Nations General Assembly, S voice rang clear. When Tehran called in their darkest hour, they weren't just asking for help. They were awakening us to a war we've been losing silently, the war for sovereignty, dignity, and respect. He gestured to the assembled African delegation, now unified in a way never seen before. Today, he declared, Africa is no longer a spectator in global conflicts. We're not the battlefield. We are the strategists. We decide who we align with, and we defend our own future. The chamber erupted in applause. Across the continent, people watched and cheered, because that 3 a.m. phone call had done more than alert one man to a war. It had awakened an entire continent to its power. And that awakening was worth every risk they had taken.